Obinna drove through the hot streets of Lagos, the sound of car horns filling the air. Sweat rolled down his neck as he gripped the steering wheel of his old taxi. The air conditioner didn't work, and the seats smelled faintly of leather and dust. It was nothing like the sleek cars he once rode, yet it gave him a strange sense of peace. He no longer had to wear a suit or attend endless business meetings. He was just another man trying to make a living. At first, the people he met didn't look twice at him. Some bargained hard for cheaper fares, others complained about the heat or the traffic. But for the first time, Obinna saw real people, not investors or rich socialites, but mothers rushing to markets, students dreaming of better lives, and tired workers heading home after long days. He began to enjoy talking with them, laughing at their jokes, and even sharing small pieces of advice. Each day reminded him that the world outside his mansion was full of stories, pain, and hope. At night, he returned to his small apartment, one with a flickering bulb and a narrow bed. He would sit by the window looking out at the streetlights and smile. There were no servants, no expensive meals, no noise from phones or meetings. Just silence and peace. But even in that peace, a question kept echoing in his mind. Will I ever meet someone who truly sees me? One evening, as he parked his taxi near the bus stop, a young woman knocked on his window. "Please, can you take me to Surulere?" she asked politely. Her voice was soft but tired, and her face glowed faintly under the streetlights. She was dressed simply in a worn blue gown, holding a small bag close to her chest. "Of course," Obinna replied, starting the engine. As they drove, she thanked him for waiting in the long traffic. "These drivers don't have patience anymore," she said, shaking her head. "Everyone is rushing." Obinna smiled. "Life in Lagos moves fast. If you don't rush, you'll be left behind." The woman laughed. "Maybe. But sometimes, slowing down helps you see things clearly." Her words stayed in his mind even after she got out of the car. She had paid the exact fare and smiled at him kindly before walking away into the night. He didn't even ask her name, yet something about her lingered. The next morning he woke up early hoping to see her again. He drove the same route, waited by the same bus stop, and scanned the crowd. Hours passed, and just as he was about to leave, he saw her again. She was carrying a basket of bread this time, trying to sell them to people in traffic. When she noticed him, she smiled warmly. "Ah, my patient driver," she said teasingly. Obinna chuckled. "I see you sell bread too?" "Yes," she said proudly. "My mother bakes them. I sell before I go to my tailoring shop." Her name was Adiz, and soon she began to take rides with him often. She talked about her dreams of owning her own fashion shop one day, about her mother's health, and how life hadn't been easy. Obinna listened quietly, moved by her strength and honesty. She never complained about her struggles, she simply worked hard and smiled through them. One day as they drove through the rain, Adiz noticed Obinna's hands. "You have clean hands for a taxi driver," she said with a laugh. He smiled shyly. "Maybe I'm still learning the trade." She nodded, not thinking much of it. To her, he was just a kind driver who listened and treated her with respect. To him, she was different from anyone he had ever met. She didn't care about luxury, status, or fame. She cared about kindness. At night, when Obinna lay in his small bed, he thought of Adiz's laughter. It reminded him of something pure, something his money could never buy. For the first time he began to feel hope. Maybe, just maybe, this disguise would lead him to what he had been searching for all along. True love that saw the man beneath the suit, the heart beneath the wealth. As the rain tapped softly on his window, Obinna smiled to himself. He didn't know what the future held, but one thing was certain. His journey as a simple taxi driver had just begun. And deep inside he felt that fate had finally started to drive him toward the one thing his billions could never give him. A love that was real. The rain fell softly that afternoon, turning the streets of Lagos into rivers of shining puddles. Obinna sat in his old taxi, listening to the rhythmic tapping on the roof. He was about to head home when he noticed a young woman standing by the roadside, struggling to keep her books dry under a small red umbrella. She waved at him and he quickly pulled over. When she stepped in, the scent of rain and fresh soap filled the car. "Good afternoon, sir," she said with a shy smile, brushing raindrops off her shoulder. "Good afternoon," Obinna replied, returning her smile. He started the engine and glanced at her through the rearview mirror. She looked tired but calm, her eyes gentle and full of warmth. "Where to?" he asked. "Ah, please take me to St. Mary's Primary School," she said, placing her heavy bag beside her. "I teach there." As they drove, the rain grew heavier and thunder rolled in the distance. Obinna noticed how she held her books close to her chest as if they were treasures. After a moment of silence, he said, You must love your job to carry so many books in this rain. She laughed softly. I do. The children make every day worth it. They're stubborn sometimes, but when they learn something new, their smiles are priceless. Her voice carried a calm sincerity that made Obinna listen closely. He had met many people in his life, business partners, investors, celebrities, but no one spoke with such honesty and simplicity. She didn't try to impress him, she just spoke from the heart. When they reached the school, she thanked him and gave him a small note for payment. Thank you for waiting, she said kindly. The next day, as fate would have it, he saw her again. She was at the same spot, umbrella in hand, smiling when she saw him. Ah, my driver again, she said playfully. Obinna grinned. Looks like we meet every time it rains. Yes, she laughed, maybe you are my lucky driver. They began to talk more during their rides. She told him about her younger brother, Chuka, who was still in school and depended on her. It's not easy, she said one afternoon, but God gives me strength. I just want to give him a better life. Obinna admired her deeply. She had so little, yet she carried herself with grace. There was no bitterness in her words, only hope. Sometimes she brought small packs of rice or beans and offered him a portion. You drive all day. You must be hungry, she'd say, passing him food through the front seat. At first Obinna refused. I know, madam, I'm fine, he would say politely. But she would insist, smiling. Please just eat. Don't make me feel bad. Eventually he accepted, and every time he did, he felt a warmth inside that no luxury meal had ever given him. One afternoon, when business was slow, Obinna decided to wait near her school. When she came out, she waved happily. Ah, you're here again. I told you, he teased, I'm your lucky driver. They laughed, and as they drove home they talked about everything, dreams, struggles, and the beauty of simple life. She told him how she wanted to start her own school one day, a place where children could learn even if their parents couldn't pay much. I want to teach them not just from books, she said. I want them to learn kindness too. The world needs more of it. Her words stayed in his heart long after he dropped her off. That night, sitting alone in his small apartment, Obinna couldn't stop thinking about her. Edaora, her name itself felt soft like a melody. She was unlike anyone he had ever met. She didn't chase wealth, didn't care about looks or luxury. She cared about purpose, about love, about giving. He began to look forward to each new day, hoping to see her again. He even found himself washing the taxi more carefully, making sure it looked clean whenever he picked her up. Sometimes when traffic was bad they shared jokes and stories. Other passengers noticed their laughter and smiled too. One morning Edaora came into the taxi looking sad. Is everything okay? Obinna asked gently. She sighed. My brother is sick and I don't have enough for medicine yet. But I'll manage. Without thinking, Obinna reached into his pocket and handed her some money. Please take this, he said softly. She looked surprised. No, I can't take your money. You already work hard enough. He smiled. I insist. Maybe one day I'll need your help too. Her eyes glistened with gratitude. You're a kind man, she said. The world needs more people like you. Obinna didn't know what to say. For a long time he had hidden his wealth to escape fake affection. But now, as a simple driver, he felt more respected than he ever had as a billionaire. That evening when he dropped her off, Edaora turned before walking away. Thank you again, she said softly. You remind me that good people still exist. As he watched her disappear into the narrow street, Obinna's heart felt full of something real. Not pride, not excitement, but quiet joy. That night, he sat by his window and thought about her again. For the first time in years he didn't feel alone. Her kindness had reached the part of him that money could never touch. He smiled to himself, whispering, maybe this is what I've been searching for. And though the city outside was loud with honking cars and shouting vendors, Obinna's heart was calm. He didn't know where this journey would lead, but he was certain of one thing. For the first time, love had entered his taxi. The days rolled by like gentle waves, and Obinna and Edaora's friendship began to grow into something deeper. Every morning when she entered his taxi, her smile lit up the dullest of days. They spoke freely, about life, dreams, struggles, and the little things that made each day meaningful. Obinna loved how her laughter filled the car. She never spoke with pride or judgment. When he dropped her off after work, she always waved and said, Thank you, Obinna. You make my days easier. Her words meant more to him than any praise he had ever received as a rich man in a suit. One evening as they drove through the crowded streets of Lagos, Edaora looked out the window and said softly, You're not like most men I know. You listen. You care. Most men only talk about money and what they have. Obinna smiled faintly. Maybe money doesn't always bring peace, he said. She turned to look at him. That's true, she replied. Peace is better than gold. When you have peace, even Gary tastes sweet. Her words touched him deeply. He wanted to tell her then and there that he was not just a taxi driver, that he was Obinna Nwosu, the billionaire everyone in Lagos talked about. But his courage failed him. What if she walked away? What if she looked at him differently? He wanted her love, not her admiration. As their bond grew, so did the whispers around Adaora. One afternoon, her friend Kayamika saw her stepping out of Obinna's taxi and frowned. Adaora, she said later that day, you can't be serious about that taxi driver. He will only bring you suffering. You deserve better. Adaora laughed softly, shaking her head. You don't know him, Kayamika. He's kind and hardworking. He respects me. That's better than money. Kayamika folded her arms. Respect won't pay the bills. Adaora sighed. Maybe not. But love without respect isn't love at all. Obinna didn't know about this conversation, but he could sense that Adaora faced pressure. Some days she seemed quieter, lost in thought. He wanted to ease her worries, but how could he, when he was hiding the biggest truth of all? That evening, Obinna sat in his small apartment, staring at the news on TV. His company's 10th anniversary celebration was coming soon, a huge event with media coverage, guests, and cameras everywhere. His assistant had called earlier reminding him, "Sir, you can't avoid it this year. Everyone expects you to speak." He rubbed his forehead. If Adaora sees me on television, he murmured to himself, she'll know everything. He turned off the TV and sat in silence. His heart was torn. Every moment with Adaora made him happy, but each day he kept his secret, guilt grew heavier inside him. He had built his entire business empire with honesty and hard work, yet here he was, lying to the only woman who had made him feel truly alive. That night he lay awake, staring at the ceiling. Should I tell her the truth? He thought. If I tell her now, she might walk away. But if she finds out on her own, she'll never forgive me. The next morning, when Adaora entered the taxi, he could barely meet her eyes. She noticed. Are you okay? She asked softly. I'm fine, he said quickly, forcing a smile. Are you sure? You look worried. He hesitated, his hands tightening on the steering wheel. Just thinking about something important. Well, she said, don't think too much. Life has a way of surprising us. She smiled, unaware of how close her words were to the truth. Later that evening, Obinna visited his company headquarters secretly. He wore a cap and plain clothes, avoiding attention. His assistant Uche greeted him. Sir, everyone is preparing for the event. The news teams will be there. You'll be on every major channel. Obinna nodded slowly. That's what I'm afraid of. Uche looked confused. Afraid, sir? Of what? This is your success. Obinna sighed. Uche, have you ever wanted something so pure that you're afraid money might ruin it? Uche blinked. Are you talking about that teacher you told me about? Obinna smiled sadly. Yes, Adaora. She thinks I'm just a taxi driver. Uche's mouth fell open. Ah, sir, you've really gone far with this disguise. It's the only way to know who truly loves me, Obinna replied. But now, I fear I've gone too far. Back in her small apartment, Adaora spoke with her younger brother, Chuka, who was studying for an exam. Brother, she said, smiling, you remember the taxi driver who helps me? He's very kind. Chuka looked up. Maybe he likes you. Adaora laughed softly. Maybe. But I like him too, he's real. He's not pretending to be what he's not. Her words would have cut through Obinna's heart if he had heard them. Because, at that very moment, that was exactly what he was doing, pretending. As the anniversary event drew nearer, posters and advertisements began to appear across the city. The logo of Obinna's company was everywhere, on buses, billboards, and even radio jingles. Obinna grew anxious every day, fearing the moment Adaora might notice. 2 days before the event, Adaora entered the taxi holding a small radio. As they drove, an advertisement played. Join us this Saturday for Nwosu Group's grand anniversary celebration. Meet CEO Obinna Nwosu, one of Lagos' finest businessmen. Obinna's hands froze on the wheel. Adaora laughed. Ah, these rich men and their parties. I wonder what it feels like to live like that. He forced a weak smile. Maybe it's not as perfect as it seems. She nodded. Still, it must be nice. But people like us, we just live simply. Her innocence tore at him. He couldn't keep lying forever. That night he made a decision. He would tell her the truth, no matter the outcome. But when he picked her up the next morning, his courage vanished again. She was happy, chatting about her students and their exams. He couldn't bring himself to interrupt her joy with his confession. He told himself, after the event, I'll explain everything. But deep down he knew, some truths can't wait forever. And as the city lights glowed in the distance, Obinna felt the weight of his secret pressing heavier than ever before. The morning of the grand celebration arrived with bright skies and restless energy in the city of Lagos. It was a day Obinna had been preparing for months, a day meant to honor his company's success and his hard work. Yet, instead of feeling proud, his heart was heavy. As he looked into the mirror, adjusting his black suit and tie, he barely recognized himself. The reflection staring back wasn't the humble taxi driver who had laughed with Adaora under the rain. It was the billionaire he had tried to hide. Cameras flashed outside his mansion as cars lined the streets. Important guests, journalists, and government officials filled the grand hall. Music played, lights sparkled, and the red carpet shimmered with luxury. But all Obinna could think of was Adaora, her smile, her kindness, and how she would feel when she saw the truth. When it was time for his speech, he stood at the podium, looking out at the sea of faces. The cameras pointed at him, capturing his every word. "Good evening, everyone," he began, his voice calm but uncertain. "Today we celebrate not just success but the power of honesty and hard work. True greatness is not in wealth, but in the lives we touch." His words came from the heart, but deep down he knew he was living a lie. As the audience applauded, the broadcast aired across the country. At that same moment, Adaora was at home, sitting on her couch, marking her students' exercise books. The television played softly in the background. She wasn't really watching, her mind was on her lesson plans for the next week. Then a familiar voice caught her attention. She looked up slowly. Her pen fell from her hand. On the screen, dressed in an elegant suit, was Obinna, the same man who drove her every day, the man who smiled quietly when she spoke about her dreams. For a moment she couldn't breathe. She leaned forward, her heart pounding. "Obinna?" she whispered. She turned up the volume. The announcer said cheerfully, "And there he is, Mr. Obinna Nwosu, CEO of Nwosu Group and one of Nigeria's youngest billionaires." Her chest tightened. She stared at the screen, watching him speak to the crowd with grace and confidence. Her mind raced back to every memory, the old taxi, the worn-out clothes, the shared meals, his shy laughter. It was all a lie. Tears filled her eyes. "Why, Obinna?" she whispered. "Why didn't you tell me?" The moment that had once felt magical, every laugh, every shared story, now felt like betrayal. She turned off the TV and sat in silence. The sound of rain began to tap against her window, soft at first, then heavier. She sat still, letting the pain sink in. The next morning, Obinna couldn't wait any longer. He needed to see her, to explain. He drove to her neighborhood in his black car, no longer hiding who he was. When he reached her small gate, he saw her standing there, holding an umbrella, her eyes red and tired. He stepped out, his voice trembling. "Adaora, please let me explain." But she shook her head. "You lied to me, Obinna." Her voice cracked with emotion. "All this time I thought you were real. I thought you were just like me." He took a deep breath and stepped closer. "Adaora, I didn't mean to lie. I just wanted someone to love me for who I am, not for my money. Every woman I met before cared only about wealth. I wanted something pure, something true." Tears rolled down her cheeks. "But you didn't give me the truth," she said quietly. "You made me believe you were poor when all along you lived in a mansion. You made me trust a lie." He knelt in front of her, his eyes filled with pain. "Adaora, you're the only one who ever saw me as a man, not as a name or a title. I never wanted to hurt you. I only wanted to know what love really meant." The rain began to fall harder, soaking his expensive suit. Adaora looked down at him, her heart breaking. She wanted to believe him, every word sounded sincere, but the wound was too deep. "You can't build love on a lie," she whispered. He looked up at her, rain dripping down his face. "Then let me build it again, this time with truth." She stepped back, shaking her head. "You already had your chance." She turned and began to walk away. Each step she took echoed in his heart like thunder. He stood there in the rain, watching her fade into the mist. His chest felt hollow, his throat tight. The city around him kept moving, cars passing, people hurrying, but to him, everything had gone silent. He remained there for a long time, the rain washing over him. In that moment, the billionaire who had everything felt poorer than ever before. When he finally returned home, the mansion felt emptier than it had ever been. The walls seemed to echo with her laughter, her voice. He sat on the edge of his bed and buried his face in his hands. For the next few days he tried calling her, but she didn't answer. He sent messages, long heartfelt ones, but she never replied. He even went to the school where she taught, waiting quietly outside her classroom, but she avoided him. His assistant Uche noticed his sadness. "Sir, are you all right?" he asked one afternoon. Obinna forced a weak smile. "No, Uche. For the first time in my life I'm not." "You tried your best," Uche said gently. "Maybe she just needs time." Obinna looked out the window watching the rain fall again. "Time can heal," he said softly, "but it can also make people forget." That night, he went back to the small apartment he had once rented as a taxi driver. It was dusty and quiet, but it felt more like home than his mansion. He sat in the old chair by the window, staring at the streets below. He remembered the laughter, the shared meals, the way Adaora's eyes sparkled when she spoke about her dreams. He whispered to himself, "I only wanted love, not loneliness." The next morning he saw a taxi drive past, old, yellow and noisy just like the one he used to drive. He watched it disappear into traffic and smiled sadly. He had learned that sometimes truth hurts more than lies, but only truth can set the heart free. As he stood by the window, the first rays of sunlight broke through the clouds. The rain had stopped. But in his heart, the storm was far from over. The weeks after Adaora walked away felt longer than any Obinna had ever lived. His mansion, once full of people, now felt empty and cold. Every corner reminded him of her laughter, her kindness, her voice. He often sat by the large window at night, staring out at the glittering city lights, wondering what she was doing. Money had always solved his problems, but this time it was useless. The one thing he wanted most could not be bought. He thought about everything she had said, how love couldn't be built on lies, how truth mattered more than comfort. Those words stayed with him, haunting him and teaching him at the same time. For the first time in his life, he understood that honesty was the true foundation of love. One quiet morning, he decided he could not continue living with regret. He needed to see her again, not to defend himself but to make things right. He put on a plain shirt and simple trousers, left his car at home and took a cab to her school. The building was small and worn down. The paint on the walls had faded and the roof looked old. Children's laughter echoed from inside the classrooms, even though their benches were cracked and their tables shaky. When Obinna stepped through the gate, he saw Adaora at the front of her class, teaching with so much joy that his heart ached. She didn't notice him at first. He stood quietly at the door, watching her smile as she helped a young boy pronounce a word. There was something beautiful about the way she cared for the children. It was pure, patient, and full of love, the kind of love he had always wanted to give and receive. For a long moment he couldn't move. He just stood there, feeling both proud and guilty. Proud that he had known such a woman, and guilty for the pain he had caused her. Finally, he turned and left before she could see him. That evening he made a call to his assistant Uche. "I need you to arrange something," he said quietly. Uche sounded surprised. "What do you want me to do, sir?" Obinna took a deep breath. "I want to fix that school. They need new desks, chairs and books. Do it quietly. Don't let anyone know it's from me." Uche was silent for a moment. "Sir, are you sure you don't want them to know?" "Yes," Obinna replied. "I'm not doing it for thanks. I'm doing it for her, and for the children." The next morning, a large truck drove into the schoolyard. The children shouted with excitement as workers carried new desks, bright chairs, clean books, and even painting tools into the classrooms. Adaora came running out, confused but smiling. "What is happening?" she asked the workers. One of them simply pointed toward the gate. She turned, and there he was. Obinna stood under the big mango tree near the gate, dressed simply, without the fancy car, the bodyguards, or the designer suit. Just a plain man with a quiet smile. Adaora froze for a moment, her heart racing. The children were laughing and clapping around them, but all she could see was him. Slowly she walked toward him. "You didn't have to do this," she said softly, her eyes full of emotion. He smiled gently. "I wanted to," he replied. "Not as a billionaire trying to impress you, but as a man who truly cares." Adaora looked at him, trying to read his eyes. They were calm, honest, and full of regret. "I hurt you," he continued, his voice low. "And I can't change what I did. But I've learned something, that love built on lies, even small ones, will never bring peace. I thought pretending would help me find something real, but all it did was push away the one person who showed me what real love looks like." Adaora sighed. "You could have told me the truth, Obinna. I didn't care about your money." "I know," he said softly. "That's why I was afraid. You were different and I didn't want to lose you. But in hiding the truth, I lost you anyway. For a long moment they stood in silence. The children ran around them, laughing and shouting with joy as they tested the new desks and opened their shiny new books. Their happiness filled the air like music. Edaora looked at the children, then back at Obinna. "They're happy," she said. He smiled faintly. "That's all I wanted." She could see it now, the sincerity in his face, the humility in his posture. The man who once hid behind wealth had changed. He was no longer the proud billionaire trying to test the world. He was just Obinna, a man who had learned to value truth over everything else. "You've changed," she said quietly. He nodded. "You changed me." There was a softness in her eyes as she stepped closer. The rain had started again, gentle and light, tapping against the tin roof. "You don't need to pretend anymore," she said. He smiled. "I won't." Then for the first time in weeks she reached out and took his hand. It was warm and steady, and in that simple touch forgiveness began to bloom. Around them the children continued to laugh, their joy filling the air like sunshine after rain. Obinna looked at her and whispered, "Thank you, Edaora." She smiled back. "Let's start again, this time with honesty." He nodded. "I'd like that." Together they stood there under the fading light, watching the children play and hearing the echoes of laughter carry across the yard. For Obinna, it felt like the first true moment of peace he had ever known. From that day on he spent more time at the school, helping whenever he could. He fixed the leaking roof, planted flowers in the small garden, and read stories to the children. Edaora worked beside him, and slowly their friendship grew into something deeper, something honest and lasting. They built their new chapter not on luxury or lies, but on truth, kindness, and trust. Obinna finally found what he had been searching for all along, not just love, but a heart that saw beyond wealth and into the soul. And every time he looked at Edaora, he remembered the lesson that had changed his life. True love doesn't need disguises, it only needs truth.